My name is Eric Stotts, and I'm the design director at DSRA Architecture, Halifax firm. I'd like to just thank CanBIM for the opportunity to give a brief presentation today about the theory and practice of BIM at our job and what we do. I'm going to start just by introducing a little bit of the theory of things. I am the design director, so there's, in my mind, a big theoretical component to the implications of using BIM. And I think it's important to, as architects, that we situate ourselves within kind of the context of architectural history. You know, how has our discipline developed over time? How have the tools that we use evolved, and how do we respond to those tools? And then Devin McCarthy, who will give the lion's share of this presentation, is going to focus on the practical application of the theory in practice at our firm. Can everybody hear me now a little bit better? Okay. So I went back through and tried to find the most current quote I could find on building information technology, and I managed to find a 114-year-old one, 113-year-old one, 112-year-old one from Frank Lloyd Wright. And this is from his Hull House lecture, which was given in Chicago in 1901. And I'm going to go ahead and read it in case some of you can't see it there. The machine is here to stay. There is no more important work before the architect now than to use this normal tool of civilization to the best advantage. Genius must dominate the work of the contrivance it has created. This plain duty of dominating the machine is relentlessly marked out for the artist in this, the machine age. Frank Lloyd Wright was really good friends with Henry Ford, and he was at a critical moment in time when mass production and industrialization was transforming architecture and transforming, well, the world landscape, and specifically the American landscape at that point. What I take from this, and I think it's really interesting and important, is Wright recognized the need for architects, in this case, architects as artists, to understand the importance of taking control of the tool, lest it take control of them. So I think that's one thing about BIM, to me personally, and to DSRA in general, that's very exciting, is how do we apply the ideas of BIM, not only practically in our collaborations with our coworkers and with our consultants and with the contractors and everybody that's in this integrated project delivery model, but what does it mean conceptually for our work, for our design, for the forms that we create and how we create them, and our design process within the office. Three quick examples of kind of that have been picked from a very long lineage of architectural history, but I think chart a certain development that gets us to today's lecture, I guess. There's the Usonian house concept that Frank Lloyd Wright developed. It was his attempt to democratize good design. How can I make a suburban house that's very highly designed, affordable for the average couple in 1939 in this case, or 1936, I believe. This is the Jacobs House in Madison, Wisconsin. What Wright had to focus on, though, was taking that concept of high design and developing standardized components that could then be assembled in the field by a small team of workers. So his attempt, which ultimately we're not all living in Usonian houses, so it's certainly, I think there were 60 of them eventually built, but the idea that you could get something good for less was his kind of push there. You know, how do we make good design accessible? His focus had to be on the process itself, on the construction process, developing details that could be high art, but at the same time easily constructed and affordably priced. Then we jump to Buckminster Fuller, the Biosphere project. And when we look at kind of mass production, what's beautiful about this concept and what makes it achievable is that it's an array of like components that are easily fabricated. The parameters of each thing are well known and they're consistent. And it results in one of the most stable structural forms that we have. Spatially, living in a sphere has its challenges, but I think this is a really good precursor to where we come when we see the Bilbao Museum. And I think that's the real, for me anyway, and I think for a lot of the architectural profession, that's kind of the watershed moment where all of a sudden we took the idea of Buckminster Fuller, you know, a plane of a million points, and Gary actually took an artistic idea and then developed the technology and the tools in order to customize his artistic vision. So each one of those points, rather than being predicated on a set of parameters that were consistent throughout, they could be manipulated by the tools. And then eventually, through the design process, through to fabrication, they could be realized and constructed. I want to say affordably because it is true, it has been built. Certainly a high budget, but this isn't Gaudi's cathedral that's still ongoing, right? This was constructed within the constraints that we're all working within. So I think this is the kind of the springboard point for us as designers to kind of reflect on what our formal vision, you know, what forms we're creating, what is our design. We have to be more critical about the tools, knowing that there's infinite possibility. You know, what do we do with those tools, I guess is the lesson that we take out of this. BIM has certainly expanded the landscape of possibility for us as designers. And a lot of these dualities that I have there, I know that it's not absolutely consistent. This is a work in project. But I think toward the right side, you know, digital, mass customized, real versus abstract, certainly BIM has enabled us to go deeper into these realms than we typically would have before in the design process. You know, Frank Lloyd Wright certainly was all about the individual. A very egotistical individual and a power-hungry individual and a creative one, but it was all about kind of this notion of the artistic genius, creating the masterwork and then having others follow through. I think we have the opportunity with BIM to realize this artistic vision in a much more collaborative way, and to have you know, more hands involved in the process. That being said, BIM technology, you know, certainly we're employing it on a daily basis and it's the way we're heading, but I've been working 17 years and I didn't touch a computer until I graduated. I did CAD at a civil engineering firm in the summers. That was my exposure to computers. All through school, I didn't touch one. So I learned to draw and I learned to build models. And that's a really important component of the design process, right? So this threshold, I think, that we have right now between these analog ways of thinking and producing objects and these digital means that are at our disposal, I think it's establishing that threshold between the two and understanding where the process is, where we situate ourselves between those two extremes, if you want to call it that, is kind of a project by project process for us. Sometimes the hand works the best. And I think it's understanding in the face of more collaboration and more technology. I think it's also important to realize when the sketch is still the most effective and efficient way to communicate the idea quickly. So that personally for me is, as a designer, is where it gets really interesting. Once again, it's taking the tool that's got infinite potential, and it's taking a critical position, understanding exactly what you're achieving and what you're gaining by using that tool, and deploying it within your organization and within your team. And like I say, the little blue squiggly line is meant to represent the fact that, within that threshold between those two, kind of the hand and mind, or the static and dynamic, architecture as abstraction or architecture as reality, each project is probably going to vary and waver between those two extremes. And I think it's a case-by-case basis. But the development moving forward is how do we bring BIM, I think for us, earlier and earlier into the design process. Certainly it's a no-brainer for us at design development on. It's shown to be a remarkably powerful tool for us. I'm interested in how do we get it that final first step into kind of the ideation stage, like when I sit down with the trace, what is the BIM equivalent to that? How can we leverage that? Devin's going to talk a little bit about that too. So there's a few questions I have moving forward. I think we have moving forward. That's why I think it's good to be here, because it's good to be around, industry professionals and just our colleagues that are, I would imagine, struggling with some of the same things. Good struggle though. What's our design process? What are the formal implications of BIM on our work? Are we building blobitecture, as it's been called, or what kind of image does it have on what we do? How can we best leverage the building information, especially during fabrication and construction? I think front-ending things, how do we get it to work in the design process? And then the tail end of things, which is the real challenge for us right now, is how are we able to more efficiently communicate with the builder and with the contractor. That's still under development for sure, but we're confident. How should our project billings, phases, and workflows be further adapted to better suit a BIM-intensive environment? The typical breakdown of a project, even through billing. Construction documents, it's changed a lot. Decisions are front-ended now. Design development is really when a lot of the decisions are being made. Schematic design, I mean, the minute you're putting elements into a BIM model, a lot of that information is already inherent. When you put that wall in, it's no longer a 6-inch spaced pair of lines. It's got information inside it. So front-ending that into the process, it changes a bit how we look at design within the office. It isn't the matter of the project architect handing it off and letting the technicians run, and add the information. We have to have the technicians that are understand what they're putting in earlier on. And how have our collaborative relationships changed, and how should they? With all team members, but specifically with our consultants. They're coming along, sometimes begrudgingly, but most often favorably, along on the ride with us. And it's the way that it needs to be. So we're trying to figure out how do we play well together, I guess. And then how much information is too much, and then how are those limits determined? I mean, architectural drawing and architectural representation has developed. It's an abstraction. It's a representational approach to information. We understand buildings in terms of plan, section, and elevation for hundreds of years. Is that still valid? I'd argue yes, but how much abstraction should remain in the equation, if at all? We certainly know we have the power to model everything. I think the important thing is for us to realize the critical things that we should. What's critical to the actual production of the product. And I'll leave it with those light questions. And I'm going to turn it over to Devin, who's really responsible for developing a lot of the competency we have in the office with regards to BIM implementation. You are the Hall of Fame Autodesk Revit user. They're going to send him a red phone, and he is online with, but seriously, he's tapped into a community and really pushing our capability to leverage this technology. So I'm going to stop talking and let him wow you.
Thank you, Eric. I should clarify, my Hall of Fame status with Revit is pending. It hasn't been confirmed, but I'm going to go now over in a bit more detail about some of the ways we've been implementing or leveraging our BIM software in the office. First, I'm just going to do a brief overview of some of the projects we're working on in the office and who we're partnering with. And then I'm going to focus on a sort of medium-scale mixed-use building that we're working on in downtown Halifax. And then I'll touch a bit at the end on some of our office standards and some research work that we've undertaken. So DSRA, we're about 15 people now, mostly architects, a few technologists, and some administrative staff. We're located on Spring Garden Road in the TD building there. We're on the top floor. We've been using Revit for a while now. Peter, our managing director, has been using it, I think, since 2004 or 6. And I've been at the office for 3 years, and all our projects have been in Revit since I've been there, and probably for about 5 years. I think every project we're working on in the office at the moment is in Revit. We're working on the Marchant mixed-use facility at Dalhousie. It's under construction. We're collaborating with BMR, who have modeled their structure in Revit, and we inherited the Revit model from Zeidler, so it's a design partnership. We're overseeing the second half of things as far as construction administration goes. And this is the new DRDC building on the Dartmouth waterfront for the Department of National Defense. Again, we partnered with BMR Engineering, so the architectural and structural models are in Revit. And that project, for most of my time in my 3 years at DSRA, I've been working mostly on this project from design development to construction documents and onto construction at BIM now. It started construction just before Christmas in 2012. So I can say too, we've developed a really good relationship with BMR. Just in the nature of modeling these buildings and having your structural consultant model them, it forces you, I think, to do better work, because when you send that model over to them, you want it to be accurate. You want to, you sort of want to be able to stand behind your work, and vice versa happens for Justin, who I've been coordinating with at BMR. We've, in my short time, I guess, in practice, it's the closest relationship I've had with a consultant as far as just the ease of picking up the phone, and in terms of how intimate in the right kind of way, I guess our relationship is, right? So I can't think of a better word, but yeah, next slide. It's certainly as if Justin is working with DSRA effectively, right? Because this is a Hornell Center, so this is the one project where the models are fully integrated in Revit that the office is working on at the moment. And the project's been put on pause for a while. So right before it was put on pause, we integrated all the models into Navisworks, and this is a screenshot from that. So we haven't.
SNC.
Oh, SNC, right? SNC is overseeing. They're the prime consultant on this, so they're sort of driving the BIM bus on this project. We're a consultant, but everything from fire suppression systems to, the plumbing fixtures to lighting are being modeled, and then they're controlling the integration in Navisworks and so on. But we just got to the beginning of that process. The project's been put on hold, so we're looking forward to beginning that again when we kickstart again. So the project I'm going to focus on mostly today is this mixed-use building on Spring Garden Road. We're working with the Westwood Group developer on this project, and this project is effectively going to be fully integrated in Revit. We have structural with Campbell Camo engineers, and then M&R Engineering is going to be modeling their mechanical and electrical systems. And so we're quite excited about that. We haven't worked with M&R before, and you know, I'm sure one of the reasons we are is that they were pretty enthusiastic about working in Revit with us. This project also hit a bit of a pause. I was hoping to show you some of that integration, the integrative aspects of that collaboration today, but project sort of went on pause right before we started that, and we just got word yesterday that we're going to start up again. So we'll be working together closely in the coming months. As I said, it's a sort of medium-sized building, mixed use. We have a mix of commercial and residential uses, and so on the left there we have about 3 floors of commercial use on the ground floor, the level below, and on the second floor. And then we have 3 floors of residential units above, up into the street wall, and then it steps back, and we have 2 floors which are sort of loft-style units being proposed. So the design context for this building, it's a very compact site. It's 50 feet by 100 feet. Given the mixed-use nature of the building, there's a lot of different ways we can kind of combine units and so on. And it's quite a tight budget. So I'm going to present some of the tools we've used in Revit to sort of help us make better decisions and help our client make better decisions, make those decisions quicker, and enable those decisions to be more informed. So responding to each of those aspects of the context, I'm going to speak to how we've worked within the HRM design guidelines, talk a bit about how we've been able to respond to HRM reviews, our own reviews, client changes quickly in the model, help our client make quick decisions based on leasable areas and so on, and quantifying materials so that, you know, it's easier to say we can go with this design, or we have to look again and make it, you know, more affordable, or we have more money to spend. We can, if we're using a marquee material, maybe we can use more of it. So the planning constraints. So simple enough in Revit, you've got a property line feature. It can appear in any plan view. This is the most basic tool, but still it's present, right? It's in every view in plans. So it reinforces, it just makes it easier to sort of, when you're setting out the building boundaries, where you can go, where you can't go. The different things we're dealing with in this context, view planes, setbacks, and the street wall height. So these are sort of the constraints we have to think about when designing. So we actually modeled those constraints in the model as a mass to see, you know, as we're developing our design, to see where we're fitting in within those constraints, or when we're going outside of them. And it's been helpful for us to sort of present to our client when there's been times to make decisions on, you know, whether we're going to try and apply for an amendment to the city to sort of go beyond what they're presenting in their documents, and then to the city likewise to say, you know, this is a situation, this is what the rules say. We really don't think this makes sense for this size of building in this context. So just modeling that is, we've been able to use that in the whole process. So you can see in the building along the party walls, we've actually gone above the allowable HRM requirements because given the 50-foot width of the lot and the nature of where you put circulation on a tight lot like this, you can't step back on all 4 sides and get useful space above 5 stories, even though the city's allowing you to go higher. So we made the case, and fortunately that was accepted. So, and we spent, you know, quite a bit of back and forth with the city on this, and taking that further, we did another study just 1 block down for the same client about just a simple massing study for a potential project, just to see what's possible within those planning constraints. And this was really a one-day exercise to quickly give them an idea on what they can do, what they can't do. You know, we're modeling view planes, those types of things. We're putting all that information in the model. And in the end, we can easily kick out some square frontages for him or her, and they can make quick decisions on, you know, we're going to approach this development this way, or really we need to approach this site in a different way because the numbers just don't work. So, you know, these are the things you can do very quickly within Revit. As I mentioned, between the back and forth with the city and our own internal reviews and the client working with a proposal that tenants aren't necessarily secure, so they might be changing. This is all happening simultaneously. So the ability to make revisions in the model, we really like Revit for this reason, because it's very quick to make changes, and obviously for them to show up in plan, section, and elevation, and not have to worry too much about, you know, drafting over them and whatnot. So these are just a few slides that speak to that, but some of the iterations that we've gone through, you know, in less than a year, as the process has developed. It also helps us make better design decisions quicker. You know, we don't have to do a really detailed rendering each time we change a design, but it gives us some pretty good 3D images for us to make quick decisions in the office, print them out, put them up on the wall, have a crit, that kind of thing. Perspective views, obviously, all real time. So we find we use, Eric and I, we step back and look at these, we print them out, and we use them quite a lot as we work through the design. So on a tight site, you know, the square footage is important to our client, and finding the right balance between something that's going to be where he's going to be able to be profitable, and, you know, the design is going to be able to be a good design that works. It's important, and as we're making those changes, you know, the area, the feedback that we get on the areas happens simultaneously. So I mean, I've been on the phone with the client and moving walls and telling them, you know, this is how much area you have now. So very simple thing, but a very effective thing. Another reason why this is important in this context is there's HRM has requirements over how much residential and commercial mix you can have in these districts. So we're able to, as we edit the model and revise it, we're able to get feedback on, you know, if we're meeting the 60% residential requirement or not. And we don't have to spend a few hours to draw the area boxes, you know, like we used to in CAD to get that answer, right? Again, quantity serving in the same way, being able to quickly give our client and ourselves, you know, numbers on the materials we're using, and eventually apply a cost to those square footages so that we can get pretty quick feedback on the envelope costs, for instance. And, you know, this is a service that, as architects, it's something that we can start to offer our clients, right? If our programs enable it and if it's done accurately, there's no reason why we can't charge for these services, really. So this is all, and this is pretty simple, but these are the types of things where we're starting to leverage the software. So again, we're looking at using terracotta on this building. The previous slide was showing the flat panels. We have sort of baguettes or louvers running around the building. Those are costed in length. The panels are costed in area, and you can customize your schedules accordingly and get the numbers that you need. I'm going to just talk very briefly about some of our office standards. DSRA is a mid-sized office. We don't have a designated BIM manager. It's been done more or less through teams, I think, throughout the office's life. In many ways, I've led the development of our library and our families, and sort of developed the standards and how we implement the software. But I've done that kind of when I've had time, and then others can kind of come in and contribute. But certainly when you're using this technology, to use it effectively, you have to be able to think kind of down the road. And if you're creating standards within your office, and if you don't maybe have a designated person who's making families or developing standards, you want to make things that are going to be easy to follow for the rest of your team and so on. So, and make standards that are going to be going to be easy to follow through on. Just a little slider about our wall standards. In our office, there's no reason why the same wall should be called a different thing in 2 different projects. So we've come up with a standard that sort of front ends the important information for the contractor when he builds it, and essentially lets you input everything about that wall just in its name. So for the user in our office, it's very clear which wall he or she might need, and then as far as our tags go, the contractor can get some quick information on whether it's steel, whether it's wood, whether it's block, and so on. So, and inputting, fire ratings and STC ratings and so on into our template so that that information can be pulled from the model right from the get-go and utilized, whether through scheduling or for other reasons it can be tagged and so on. So like inputting that information into your templates means you can leverage that later on. And Revit was new to me 3 years ago, and sort of in the city when I've heard architects talk about Revit and why they aren't implementing it, or other BIM software, it doesn't have to be Revit, but I've come across a lot of architects being hesitant because of the detailing aspect of it, and maybe they have established CAD libraries. But in my experience, and I think in some of the architects who have since joined DSRA, since I've been there, we find that the detailing aspect of Revit is one of the reasons why it's so great. You have to spend some time to develop your components and your families, but it's much quicker and much easier to detail, and there's very little drafting, so our details are more consistent, more accurate, and when you're detailing with component, it's just a certain way of drawing or a presentation. So we do line weights by component versus, the edge of the wall. We do primary structure has a certain line weight, secondary structure has another line weight, and then the lines beyond have another line weight. So the nature of the program suggests how it's being presented, and we want to work within that, and not, so it changes the way we might have done drawings in CAD, but there's still an art to the way these drawings are presented, and they're clear and so on. Again, our families, simple rules, 2 line weights so that anybody can kind of plug in and go with them. Quick to make, easy to use. And again, there's some time spent making them, but by far we save a lot of time on detailing because you're just placing components and you're not drafting, right? So I find for those who are maybe considering switching to this kind of software, it's a no-brainer as far as detailing goes, construction documents. I'm going to finish with a little research project that we undertook with Roland Hudson, who's actually going to be on the panel here later today. DSRA has worked on a number of recreational facilities, and trying to build on that experience and expertise, we partnered with Lloyd to develop a tool where we could develop iterative design options for stadium seating and sort of theater seating. And so we developed a program with Rolly that would sort of let us input, some information like the number of spectators, the number of tiers, the rake of the seating, in order to get sort of the best view quality, increase the number of spectators and so on. So we developed a tool that would let us sort of input different parameters and get different options in real time. And our hope was to sort of do that in Revit. That was the intent of the project. We were successful or not as far as that goes. We had some issues implementing some of our components in Revit. We found there's some actually challenges within Revit about I guess importing certain geometries into the program. So we hit some walls, but ultimately we were still able to create these 3D geometries in AutoCAD and generate components that could be sent to a fabricator and could be built off of the model. So in terms of what's next, we're curious, and we'd like to move from just design and start using the information that's in a model for fabrication purposes. So that's an Excel sheet of all those bleacher components with the dimensions that are required for construction. that's just a little taste of some of the research we're doing. That's the presentation. Thank you. If there's any questions, feel free.
Hi, it's Nick Baxter from O'Neill Scriven Associates. Just wondering, you mentioned earlier in the presentation about collaborating with other consultants in BIM, and I'm wondering if the fees have changed at all as respect to that, whereas, you know, you're looking at a 3D design over a 2D design, and, you know, it's kind of a value-added component with better coordination in the end.
No. No, not really. I mean, it's, you know, we look at it as certainly, you know, we're providing still the same service in terms of our billing right now. I think certainly how we bill within a project lifespan, we need to look at how we change that. And then the comments earlier about this idea of the slush fund from the coordination money, that's really fantastic. I think it hadn't occurred to me, but I mean, that's, you know, incentivizing that collaboration. I mean, I guess the way we look at it is it's kind of sink or swim. You know, it's gonna go that way. So we're there right now, and we don't feel that it represents an extra right now. But I should probably stop talking because I probably selling the farm here. But no, I overall, I don't think that BIM as a technology has impacted the way that we bill, and but I think it should. And we're looking for direction, I think, and guidance, and looking down to the States, for example, where I think there's been more adoption, and I think that there's been a lot of white papers, and, you know, the AIA has a lot of information in terms of how, you know, how you bill for a BIM project, for example, and the legal ramifications too, I guess, are the other thing that are a big unknown right now, and ownership and all these things. So long-winded way of saying it's kind of business as usual right now, but it's probably going to change.
Nicola Preston with Textile Construction. We use ArchiCAD, so we're kind of probably one of the few people who use that for BIM modeling. My curiosity is in your experience using Revit, and most of the people here probably are users of Revit. How much of the materials and things that you get from the industry, the producers, how much can you find that as a database that you can import into your model directly? And what format is that? Because from my point of view, with my little experience so far with BIM through ArchiCAD, I think that would be the great thing in the industry if there was a coordination of the database. So therefore the producers, manufacturers have their catalogs, the ceramics that you were showing in the project you're illustrating. You could take that into your model, try different color schemes of their product line. If you don't like the modules that are available in that producer, you pick another producer and instantly see kind of in your design, as well as have like a price list. From your experience, is there a lot of stuff available that's tailored to Revit, or is there enough stuff that's available kind of universally in IFC, or what's your point of view on this aspect?
From my experience, and I'll turn it over to Devin, furniture manufacturers they're on board. Lighting manufacturers, it's all in there. Elevator manufacturers, those are great actually. With the shafts, you know, already in machine rooms and all, just literally drop it into the model, define your lifts, and you're done. I can't remember which one, but I won't say it anyway. But Devin, I don't know, like.
Yeah, I think there's more and more Revit. Well, for us, you know, we're looking for Revit family files, I guess, and there's more and more available. Different manufacturers, some do them better than others, and then there's a question of if you have standards in the office, how do you work with those families so that they show in the same way that you present your own that you've made, maybe, but it would. They're out there. Like the last time I went through a big push on construction drawings, you know, we incorporated a bunch, and I'm going to be doing that again on this mixed-use building. So I'll be seeing what's new. I guess. But each time we make some, I mean, for instance, our detail families, they're not sort of generic curtain wall mullions. They're the Conair mullions, right? That family I showed you was an insulated metal panel. It's a Kingspan panel. It is what it is, and it's so we look to the manufacturers first. If they don't have Revit files, we take the CAD and we'll work with those. I mean, most of our components are 2D anyway. We're definitely using some 3D components, so that elevator family would be one, but we tend to think, we want to think critically about what 3D components we're making. Does it need to be 3D, because that's going to increase the file size and so on. So we don't just take whatever family is available on the web. Do we really need families? If it's 2,000 or 3,000, 4,000 kilobytes, it's going to change the performance of the model. So we ask ourselves, does this need to be 3D? Does it need to be 2D? And we kind of go through there. We try to filter it through that first.
So that's a good point about what level of stuff has to be in 3D. So you're finding that a lot of things are available for Revit directly, and I think that's because it's an Autodesk product, and obviously the industry.
And I think probably because it's the most used software in North America, but there's still a lot of manufacturers that don't have the Revit families out there.
What about IFC format? Why can't we get to a format that doesn't matter about the software? That was one of the comments that was made early on, that it shouldn't be a software. What really makes it convenient for a designer and for a builder and for a producer is that the language is universal, and then the software is whatever personally you prefer or whatever. In Europe, they use a lot of ArchiCAD because it was developed there. Whereas here it's kind of like it's not as big and it's growing, I suppose. So we shouldn't be that shouldn't be the point of the discussion, but that there's an industry standard that doesn't matter. It's not based on what kind of software you're using, and I think that's the tendency. I attended the RAIC kind of seminar just a few days ago, and it seems like they're realizing, and that's where the industry is going. But I think we have a long way to go. But I mean, obviously the potential of just being able to get any producers or manufacturers product information, plug it in, and know what it costs, and estimate it, and see it in its colors and forms. And
I hope it goes in that direction, because because I think it's healthy if there's a few software platforms that are being used, because it can be frustrated to see the difference between Revit 2013 and 2014 sometimes. It's not that much, right?
Well, that's true. I think the software companies learn from each other, because if one finds a great idea on how to make it easier to use and more powerful and effective, then the others will follow. So that's the good thing about competing. So if you get sort of polarized because one is a Autodesk product or not, that may not be as helpful. But anyway, it's interesting to have seen your experience. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Steve Dunn from Global E-Training. You had mentioned that DSRA were early adopters of BIM. I'm just wondering if you have any suggestions or recommendations for other firms that may be earlier on in their BIM implementation, and I'm thinking specifically around training and education.
Yeah, and Peter really drove that decision early on. Peter Connell, who will be here later on the panel. In my own experience, I mean, I was notoriously in school, not anti-computer, but most of my classmates, at least at McGill, would be surprised that I'm up here speaking, or, I'm sort of leading the BIM adoption in the office. But for me, it was something new to learn, and like one of the speakers said before, it's not so much learning the software that's hard, it's learning how to collaborate well and to leverage the software. So. That being said, DSRA did support me a bit. I did some courses through Imagine It and so on. But there's so much to learn just from the web. If you have a question, put it in to Google and you find the answer a lot of the time. So a lot of what I've learned is just through my own sort of looking for answers out on the web and learning that, and that's how I've learned the software for the 99% of it. As an office, maybe on a broader level, maybe Eric might have something to speak to that, and Peter later on. But I mean, I would say don't hesitate in front of the software. You'll learn it like anything else, I think. And people, it's something new. So I find a lot of young people are curious to learn that. And to,
I'll just very quickly. I know we're just about done for time here, but I just say go all in, really. I worked at a firm in Southern California, big firm, healthcare, you know, hundreds of employees, and they were running Microstation, and they were making a transition to this is horrible Frankenstein of a program. I won't give the name. It was just one of these hybrid programs. It's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and we're going to package it all together into a 4 gigabyte program that's going to, and it was just, you know, trying to make that that steady, gradual transition is just really hard to manage, because you're always going to have folks that are just going to be hesitant to dive in. And I think the shock and awe approach is just the way to go. But that's it.
One more thing too, like if within that practice there's certain people that are charged with sort of implementing that technology more than others, they should also be charged with sharing that information with the rest of the office. So we did quite a lot of that in the first couple of years I was there, where I'm sharing what I'm knowing. I'm doing lunch and learns just within the office so that everyone is on the same page. But just the culture within the office is important, I think, in terms of how well you will adapt that technology or whatever it is. So,
Chris Foran from Surf and Dumbrack. Thanks, Eric and Devin. Great presentation, by the way. Curious to know if you can comment on some of your experiences with 3D laser scanning and how you guys may have used some of that documentation to complement your projects, either from an existing conditions aspect or an as-built aspect?
We haven't done any, but we'd love to.
yeah.
I mean, I think that, yeah, give me your card. No, but we haven't really leveraged a lot of that particular, you know, in the field, whether it be, you know, preliminary from the survey perspective, or, you know, during construction, where we're basically checking our work. But I mean, we'd be absolutely game for that, because it makes so much sense. Are you guys engaged in that right now?
Yeah, we're a full 3D laser scanning provider.
Okay.
So we're looking at a bunch of different angles. That's what I was curious for your perspective.
Yeah. I mean, and that speaks to the fact that, you know, as an office, we can do so much in developing our own library and so on and so forth, but we can't really continue to progress unless our consultants are pushing us as well. Yeah, and so that's why we're looking forward to working with M&R on this project, because we're going to be doing mechanical, electrical, and, you know, under SNC's umbrella on Hornell, because for the first time, really, we're going to be collaborating completely. So, yeah.
Tom Strong, Melstone. So with your experience in the local market here, are you seeing contractors and subtrades starting to ask for your models, and have you shared information to work closely with the builders?
Yeah, well, actually, we were psyched. Atlantica asked us for our Revit model. That's my first time sharing with a contractor. Yeah, but so we've you know, kind of, we're still uncertain about, you know, what value that represents, and, you know, even responsibility for that. But we've approached it from the standpoint that we're going to do the postmortem after we're all done. We're going to sit down and we're just going to see how useful it was. You know, what we need to incorporate into our model that could be helpful downstream, because right now we don't know, right? So we're using this as an opportunity to learn about how we can improve the quality and the quantity of the information.
Are you maintaining your models through construction with site instructions and change orders?
I mean, I should have raised my hand, but I feel fairly confident my as-builts will be accurate at the end. So as you know, through RFIs and that thing with details changing, I'm changing them in the model. Yeah.
Have you thought about implementing a strategy around like 3D submissions? You know, obviously, one of the challenges of going paperless is that you've got to exchange information digitally, and, you know, a lot of subs work in 3D, especially the steel contractors. Have you looked into that process and collecting that information, integrating it with your information?
We haven't, but I know that we do work for DND, and I know that they're currently working on a BIM standard. Now, I can't really speak to it, so you know, short answer, no, but it's certainly something that we want to start exploring soon, because it's, I mean, the benefits, the potential benefits, just, it seems like a no-brainer.